Túrin Turambar is going to die today. He's already slain the dragon. He's rescued his home. He's delivered his people from their doom. And yet still, this is the end. This is the last day of our hero's life, and what a day it's destined to be. Maya Golvan and Melanin, and welcome to our final installment in this series explaining and breaking down Tolkien's epic First Age tale of the Children of Húrin. And in the last video, quite a lot happened. Túrin killed Glaurung. He avenged himself and his sister and all the elves of Nargothrond. But as he withdrew his sinister black blade Gurthang, a spout of Glaurung's venomous black blood splashed onto his hand, and in the same moment the dragon opened an eye, and the malice in his glance smote Túrin as if he'd been struck by an arrow. A black sleep fell upon him, and then, well, a lot of other things occurred. Bad things. But Túrin was unconscious throughout all of them. So, when the night of doom passes and the breath of morning comes again, Túrin knows nothing of anything that's transpired since his killing of Glaurung, his moment of ultimate victory. As night departs, Túrin rolls over in his sleep, and the hilt of Gurthang drives itself into his side. Suddenly he awakes and springs to his feet. His hand hurts, and the air about him stinks of death, but all else seems well. The dragon is dead. Brethiel is safe. The son of Húrin has conquered. Surely all that's left now is for Túrin to return home to Amonabel, share the good news, and enjoy his happily ever after with his wife Niniel, and his friend Brandir, and all his adoring fans amongst the woodsmen. But something is strange. Túrin lifts his burnt hand and marvels. It's been tended to and bandaged with a strip of white cloth. Someone tried to heal him, but then it would appear left him, lying beside the dragon. Someone was here recently, but now he is alone. Why? The place of the dragon's death is grim indeed, and although Túrin is curious about the who and the how and the why of his bandaged hand, what he wants most is soon to be back in his own home, feeling the gentle hands of Niniel and the good skill of Brandir. So he picks up Gurthang, and he sees that the light of its sharp edges is undimmed. The venomous blood of the dragon did no harm whatsoever to the black blade, and as Túrin lifts his sword, he speaks to it, saying, "Foul was the venom of Glaurung, but you are stronger than I, Gurthang. All blood will you drink. Yours is the victory." Then Túrin Turambar turns his back upon Glaurung, and he leaves his nemesis there to rot. Once a blight upon the world, a most trusted agent of the Dark Lords, now a corpse left to decay beneath the open sky. And with the dead dragon now behind him, Túrin sets off for home. Weary, but with hope high in his heart, heading off into the grey light of early day. But he decides to go via Nengirith, the Shuddering Water, expecting there may be 1 or 2 scouts waiting there who might be able to tell him why his burned hand is bandaged with white cloth. What he does not expect to find, however, is everyone. Almost. At the very moment Túrin arrives at the Shuddering Water leaning on Gurthang, he finds a large group of woodsmen getting ready to go forth and find someone's dead body, lying somewhere near Kabed in Aras, or Kabed Nairamath, as they're now calling it. Túrin stands before his people and he greets them gladly. He did tell them to wait for him back at Ethelbrandir. Weird that they didn't, but it's fine. It's fine. All is well. However, the people of Brethiel do not look at Túrin as if all is well. When they see him, they give back in terror. Women wail and cover their eyes, believing that they look upon an unquiet spirit. Túrin finds this odd. It is a bit strange. Why isn't everyone happier to see him? But it's fine, it's fine. Everything is fine. He says, "Nay, do not weep, but be glad. See, do I not live? Have I not slain the dragon?" But, shockingly, these words do not cheer up the people of Brethiel. Instead, they all turn and look inward, towards their former chieftain, Brandir, son of Handir. Then they turn on him, crying that Brandir is a fool who came with false tales. They say that he is mad, and although Brandir says no words in his own defense, he looks upon Túrin aghast and with fear in his eyes. Weird. But it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Brandir must have been the one who came and bandaged his burned hand. It all makes sense now. Túrin says to him, "It was you then that were there and tended my hand. I thank you." Then he turns to the rest of the people in Brethiel and he defends Brandir, chastising them for calling him a fool. "Speak not so to him, fools all of you. Which of you would have done better? At least he had the heart to come down to the place of battle. But now, son of Handir, come. There is more that I would learn. Why are you here, and all this people whom I left at Ethelbrandir? And where is Niniel? At the least, I may hope that you did not bring her hither, but left her, where I bestowed her, in my house, with true men to guard it." The people of Brethiel remain silent. Where is his wife? Where is Niniel? For her first I would see, and to her first will I tell the tale of the deeds in the night. Still, the people speak not a word, but they all turn their faces away from him. Eventually, Brandir says, "Niniel is not here." Which? Good! She shouldn't be. That is well then. Túrin says, "I will go to my home. Is there a horse to bear me? Or a beer would be better?" "No," says Brandir with anguish of heart. "Your house is empty. Niniel is dead." Before Túrin has an opportunity to process this news, one of the women in the crowd steps forward and she very confidently tells Túrin, "Pay no heed to him, lord, for he is crazed." Now, the woman in question is the wife of Dorlas, and just like her now slain husband, the wife of Dorlas has very little love for Brandir. She goes on to tell Túrin that he came crying that you were dead, and called it good tidings. But you live. Why then should his tale of Niniel be true, that she is dead, and yet worse. Túrin doesn't understand. He always thought of Brandir as a friend. Yes, he did tell Niniel the truth about Turambar's secret identity, and yes, he did tell her to wait after Turambar proposed marriage, and yes, he did seem overly friendly with her, but why would he be making up these lies, pretending that Niniel is dead? So, my death was good tidings, he says to Brandir. Yes, ever did you begrudge her to me, that I knew. And now she is dead, you say, and yet worse. What lie have you begotten in your malice? Would you slay us then, with foul words, since you can wield no other weapon? Now, I feel like there are two ways that Brandir could go about handling this admittedly incredibly difficult situation. He could choose the path of pity, guided by compassion and prioritizing Túrin's well-being, seeking to mitigate harm, or he could be a bit of a dick about it. And it turns out Brandir does not choose the former. Crazed? Brandir cries as anger drives pity from his heart. Nay, crazed are you, Black Sword of Black Doom, and all this dotard people. I do not lie. Niniel is dead. Dead, dead. Seek her in Tyrgleen. Slowly, I imagine, it's starting to dawn on Túrin that maybe everything is not fine. He stands still and cold. How do you know? He says, and how did you contrive it? I know because I saw her leap, but the contriving was yours. She fled from you, Túrin, son of Húrin, and in Kabed en Aras she cast herself, that she might never see you again. Niniel, nay, Nienor, daughter of Húrin. What? That is impossible. Nienor is in Doriath, actually. Yes, her name does sound a little bit similar to Niniel's, but that's not the point. She is living in Doriath, under the protection of Thingol and Melian. Túrin even made the conscious decision to not go there, to not darken her doom with his own. That's why he came to Brethiel in the first place, to avoid meeting his sister. So, no, that can't be true. Brandir must be lying. Túrin's sister is safe and sound and far away. The question is, where is his wife? Túrin seizes Brandir. Nothing do you know of Nienor, my sister? Nothing. It is a lie of your own vile mind. Brandir shakes him off, and he tells Túrin the full story. She whom Túrin called wife was the one who tended his burned hand. She called out to him, begging him to awake, but Túrin did not answer her. The dragon, however, did. Suddenly, a fey laughter falls on Brandir. He senses his own imminent death approaching, but he cackles at Túrin nonetheless as he repeats the last words of Glaurung. Nienor, daughter of Húrin, here is your brother. Treacherous of foes, faithless of friends, a curse unto his kin. On their deathbeds men will speak true, they say, and even a dragon too, it would seem. Túrin, son of Húrin, a curse unto your kin, and unto all that harbour you. Something in Túrin snaps. Why does Brandir lie? Where is his wife? And also, who is his sister? Túrin grabs Gurthang, and a fell light comes into his eyes. And what shall be said of you, who told her secretly behind my back my right name, who brought her to the malice of the dragon, who stood by and let her die, who would now gloat upon me? Do men speak the truth before death? Then speak it now, and quickly. Brandir looks at his second cousin, his nemesis, and he sees his own death in Túrin's face. But he does not flinch, and he does not make any effort to de-escalate. Instead, he stands up to Gurthang and he says, "All that has chanced is a long tale to tell, and I am weary of you. But you slander me, son of Húrin. Did Glaurung slander you? If you slay me, then all will see that he did not. Yet I do not fear to die, for then I will go to seek Niniel whom I loved, and perhaps I may find her again, beyond the sea." Túrin and Brandir are surrounded by woodsmen, and every eye is fixed on Gurthang. But still, Brandir persists with this unconscionable, intolerable, unfathomable lie. "Seek Niniel," Túrin says. "Nay, Glaurung you shall find, and breed lies together. You shall sleep with the worm, your souls mate, and rot in one darkness." Then Túrin lifts Gurthang, and acting as judge, jury, and executioner, he strikes down and kills Lord Brandir, right there where he stood. But this wasn't murder. It was justice. Brandir was lying, right? Well, despite their complicated feelings for their former chieftain, the Halathrim at Nengirith are horrified to see him cut down and killed quite so brutally. They hide their eyes from the deed, and they turn away from Túrin, fleeing from Nengirith and from their black thorn of Brethiel in terror. And so, once again, Túrin is alone, with his grief and his regret and his hope of finding Niniel. She might still be alive. He wanders the wild woods, calling out her name, but also cursing Middle-earth and all the life of men. Until, at last, Túrin's madness and his grief and his guilt begin to lift just enough that rational thought reasserts itself. He ponders his deeds and his life, and he hears himself repeating the words that were spoken to him back when he returned to Dor Lomin, the words spoken by Labadal and the Lady Irene. "Your sister dwells in the hidden kingdom and is safe." Túrin doesn't know what's happened to Niniel, but he doesn't believe the story of Brandir, and he doesn't trust the words of Glaurung. Years ago, Glaurung told him that Nienor and Morwen were suffering under Easterling rule in Dor Lumin, but that wasn't true. It was the dragon's deception, a lie designed to delude him into abandoning Finduilas. So why should he believe this isn't another deception of the dragons, designed to deceive him into abandoning Niniel, his wife? Nienor dwells in the Hidden Kingdom, where she is safe. So long as that is true, Brandir's story simply can't be. And that means Brandir must have been lying. And that means Túrin was not unjust in slaying him. And that means Túrin is not a curse unto his kin. And that means it's fine. So long as Nienor is alive and safe in Doriath, there is still hope for Niniel in Brethiel. And so, Túrin realizes he must go back to the one place he swore he would never return to find the one person he decided he didn't want to find, to prove that Nienor is not Niniel. This reality is not true. Brandir wasn't honest. Glaurung wasn't right. He isn't a curse unto his kin. His wife isn't his sister. And the proof of it lies in Doriath. So, Túrin decides that he will not let the lies of Glaurung lead him astray for a second time, and he heads off towards the crossings of Tyagleen, planning to go onward to the girdle of Melian and beyond it, back into the kingdom of Eleuthingol. However, before Túrin arrives at the crossings of Tyagleen, he finds himself passing by Howth en Eleth, the mound of the elf maid, the grave of Finduilas. And there he stops, and he cries, and he says to the dead princess, "Bitterly have I paid, O Finduilas, that I ever gave heed to the dragon. Send me now counsel." And as Túrin says these words, counsel does indeed find him, though definitely not in any form that he was expecting. He looks up from the green grave and suddenly he spies figures, 12 of them, using the crossings and coming towards him. They are huntsmen, and all of them are well armed, but they are not men of Brethiel returning to their homes. Instead, they are grey elves of Doriath, and they've come specifically to find that black thorn of Brethiel, the now famous and self-proclaimed Master of Doom, who wields the black sword, the secret son of Húrin. And as this elven hunting company draws near, Túrin recognizes their leader, an old friend, whom Túrin hasn't seen since he was 21 years old on his very last day in Doriath. And Mablung of the Heavy Hand, chieftain of the Hunters of Eleuthingol, recognizes him in return. And he is happy indeed. It's been 15 years since they parted ways, but finally, Mablung has confirmation that his dear friend Túrin is still alive. Túrin? Well met at last. Glad I am to see you living. though the years have been heavy on you. Heavy, says Túrin. Yes, as the feet of Morgoth. But then he asks Mablung, why are you glad to see me? It would appear he is the only one in Middle-earth who is. But for Mablung, that's a really odd question. Obviously, he's glad to see Túrin. He loves Túrin. The elves of Doriath hold Túrin in high honor. They always have. He's the foster son of their king and queen. Why wouldn't Mablung be glad to see his friend alive? He tells Túrin that he and his 12 hunters have come to Brethiel with the specific intention of finding him and helping him, lending their aid in the great upcoming battle against Glaurung. Mablung explains he's heard many stories in these lands told by many wanderers that the black sword of Nargothrond has been seen again in Brethiel, that a great army of orcs were slain by him, and because of his prowess, all forces of evil now fear these crossings of Tyrglin and this mound of the elf maid. But more recently, the elven march wardens upon Doriath's west border spotted a sudden rising of black smoke all the way away in Nargothrond. They perceived that Glaurung was on his way to Brethiel, bringing fire and ruin to the place where orcs won't dare go, a place protected by the son of Húrin. And so, Mablung and the other elves of Doriath grew afraid for their old friend, for the boy who'd grown up amongst them, and dreading the might of Morgoth's most destructive servant so far, 12 of them came to warn him and to aid him. The dragon is on his way, but Túrin need not fight it alone. His friends from all those years ago are with him now. And so poor Túrin has to tell the elven hunters Glaurung is already dead. He killed the dragon himself. To which all 12 elves are astounded and delighted. This is fantastic! They all look at Túrin in wonder, and they tell him, "You have slain the great worm. Praised forever shall your name be among elves and men." But Túrin cares not, for his mind now has far greater concerns than a dead dragon. However, there is one thing Mablung could do to help. One thing that would actually make everything so much better. Just confirm what Túrin already has to believe. After all, Mablung is an elf of Doriath. Surely he must know Nienor. Túrin asks for news of her. Anything. Just tell him she's safe and she's still there. Please. But of course, Mablung cannot do that. For a long while, none of the elves answered Túrin, but at length, Mablung speaks. They did so indeed, but they are not there now, alas. I imagine Túrin's mind must be unraveling at this moment as seemingly separate questions begin to collide. Where is his sister? And who was his wife? Túrin's heart stands still as he hears the feet of doom pursuing him to his end. with what must surely be immense regret and sorrow, Mablung explains. They went out into the wild seeking you. It was against all counsel, but they would go to Nargothrond when it was known that you were the Black Sword. And Glaurung came forth, and all their guard was scattered. Morwen none have seen since that day, but Nienor had a spell of dumbness upon her, and she fled into the woods like a wild deer and was lost. Niniel had a spell of dumbness on her too, way back when he found her, wild and lost like a deer. Túrin suddenly begins to laugh, loud and shrill. Finally, the wild woman with the mysterious missing memories is beginning to make sense in the most horrifying of ways. "Oh, the fair Nienor," he suddenly cries. "Brown as a berry, she was. Dark was her hair, small and slim as an elf child. None could mistake her." Mablung looks at his friend in dismay. "Some mistake is here. Not such was your sister. She was tall, and her eyes were blue, and her hair fine gold. You cannot have seen her." And there it is, the final confirmation. Túrin very much has seen his sister Nienor. He married her, and then she killed herself, and now this unfathomable reality is rapidly becoming impossible to refute. Glaurung was right. He really is a curse unto his kin. Twice beloved Niniel killed herself because of him. Brandir was murdered unjustly because of him. His family is destroyed in a uniquely sinister way because of him. Túrin loses his mind. Since childhood, he's been groping blind in a dark mist of Morgoths. He curses Menegroth and Mablung's errand, and he flees from the elves like the wind, filling them with fear and with wonder. Mablung knows none of the details, but he perceives that some strange and dreadful thing has chanced, and he must lead his company after Túrin so that they may aid him in his grief. But Túrin outruns them all. Flying like a deer himself, he hurtles back in the direction from which he's just come, back to the place where his day began, back to Kabed en Aras and the corpse of the rotting Glaurung. Despite the season, all the trees around this place are now withered and leafless, as if a mournful winter has fallen on the first days of summer. Túrin stands still at Kabed in Aras. He hears the roaring of the water, and I imagine a part of him must be very strongly considering casting himself over the brink, just like Niniel did, and letting the teeth of Tyrglin take him to her. But he doesn't. Instead, he cries aloud, "Kabed in Aras, Kabed Nairmarth, I will not defy defile your waters where Niniel was washed. For all my deeds have been ill, and the latest the worst. Then he draws his black sword, and he says to the blade, Hail Gurthang, iron of death. From no blood will you shrink. Will you take now Túrin Turambar? Will you slay me swiftly? To which the black blade, forged from a meteorite and glowing with a pale fire, imbued with the wicked will of Aeol the Dark Elf, its malicious maker, speaks in answer. The seemingly sentient Gurthang replies to Túrin in a cold voice. Yes, I will drink your blood, that I may forget the blood of Beleg my master, and the blood of Brandir slain unjustly. I will slay you swiftly. Then Túrin sets the hilt of Gurthang upon the ground, and he casts himself upon its point. The black blade breaks beneath him, and thus the life of Túrin Turambar becomes the last thing ever to be taken by the black sword. Beside the place where Nienor Niniel took her life, Túrin dies by his own hand. Now, I think there are quite a few things to examine here. Firstly, talking sword. That's unusual. There is only one other example of any talking object anywhere in Tolkien's writings, and it can be found in Chapter 2 of The Hobbit. In that chapter, we are told about a talking troll purse that a blundering Bilbo Baggins bungled the burgling of. In that story, as Bilbo is trying to burgle this purse from the troll, it chirps up and it alerts its owner, Bill. Now, maybe this talking purse is just an embellishment of Bilbo's. It might be an example of, the early Hobbit chapters not necessarily always gelling with other parts of the Legendarium, or it may be a uniquely powerful object of elven or dwarven craftsmanship. But either way, the only other talking object in all of Tolkien's Legendarium is Gurthang. You might be wondering, what about the One Ring? In adaptations, it is often portrayed as being able to kind of whisper in a sinister way, but in the books, that's not the case. The One Ring is definitely a magical item. It can react to things, but it is not a sapient speaking character. But maybe Gurthang is. I guess we could speculate on this for days, but there are three particular interpretations that I especially want to point out. Firstly, we could suppose that Gurthang's voice and its wicked words are in some way an extension of the sword's original maker, that Aeol the Dark Elf. It would definitely appear that Aeol did invest Gurthang, or Anglakel back then, with some of his own malicious will, so maybe this is Aeol talking to Túrin. But I don't really think that's the case. As I just said about the One Ring, when you invest a part of your essence into an object that you craft, it does not give that object personality and sapience in Tolkien's writings. Also, unlike the Maya Sauron during the time of the Ring, Eol the Dark Elf is totally dead by this point. I'll tell his story in much more depth when we get to the tale of Gondolin, but the truth is he died 64 years before Túrin was even born. And with death and Fëanor and Mandos all working the way they do, I'm unconvinced that Eol could still meaningfully be around in Middle-earth to interact with Túrin after he died. Another way to interpret Gurthang's seeming to speak is by looking towards an out-of-universe answer. In the introduction video of this series, I talked about Tolkien's fascination with a real-world figure of Finnish mythology called Kullervo the Hapless, whose story Tolkien translated from the Finnish Kalevala when he was only 22 years old. And Kullervo's tale certainly does bear quite a few similarities to Túrin's. Not least, both characters eventually end their own lives after finding out that they both accidentally married their own sisters, and that those sisters have also both just ended their lives, but first both Túrin and Kullervo effectively ask their swords if the blade will consent to taking their lives. And in both cases, the swords reply that they will gladly drink the blood of their respective heroes. So, from an out-of-Middle-earth perspective, I think the likeliest explanation for why Tolkien wrote Gurthang this way is because it's such a specific reference to the tale of Kullervo, and the germ from which Tolkien's entire mythology eventually grew. But there is a third interpretation of this talking sword that may be a little bit less, exciting from a big picture plot perspective, but I prefer it. I choose to believe it because I think it really enhances things from a character perspective. We know that even without Eol's literal spirit being inside it, Gurthang is a sinister sword, and just like the One Ring, it does seem to be a magical item. And so, I would suggest the cold words that Túrin hears coming out of the blade and answering his question might simply be a manifestation of his own dark thoughts, amplified and given a voice by the malice of his wicked weapon. And the reason that I choose to interpret the story this way is because I really think it recontextualizes Túrin's death. If we accept that the cold words of Gurthang originated in the mind of Túrin, then that would mean that his very last thoughts are of Beleg, his best friend whom he killed with this sword on one of the worst days of his life, and also of Brandir, a guy he did not have the utmost love for, but he did kill unjustly on the worst day of his life. I really don't think Túrin's death should be viewed wholly as a suicide. To a very significant extent, I think Túrin is performing an act of execution. When Brandir broke his own staff and renounced his lordship, he made Túrin the chieftain of Brethiel. By the laws and customs of the Edain, Túrin has a duty to his people. As a descendant of the chieftains of Beor and Hador and Haleth's houses, he's the only one with the authority to deliver justice upon himself and to carry out the sentence. For it can no longer be denied. Brandir acted like a bit of a dick, but he was murdered. and in the act of murdering him, Túrin proved Glaurung's words true. He is a curse unto all those that harbour him. And so, within the morality of this story, it is arguably the duty of the last chieftain of the Edain to perform the execution of the cursed son of Húrin. When Mablung and his company of hunters catch up to Túrin, they find him already dead. They look upon the fallen hero and upon the slain dragon, and they begin to weep. And as they do so, the people that were at Nengirith, the Halethrim who ran from Túrin's crime, come down from the shuddering water to seek proof of Glaurung's demise for themselves. But when they witness what end the life of Turambar of Brethiel came to, they weep as well, and they tell the elven hunters who their beloved Turambar was, and who their wonderful Niniel was. And at last, Mablung understands everything that's occurred. Bitterly, he realizes that ever since he rode to the Battle of Unnumbered Tears all those years ago with Beleg Cuthalion, to fight alongside Húrin Thalion, greatest of all the men of Dorlomin on that day, Mablung has been enmeshed in the doom of the children of Húrin, and today with words he has slain one whom he loved. The elves of Doriath and the men of Brethiel work together, labouring with many hands to gather wood and to build a great burning to destroy the body of Glaurung. His flesh is turned to black ash and his bones are beaten to dust. And the place where the dragon died and then was later burned will forever afterwards be bare and barren. But the body of Túrin, that is laid in a high mound upon the place where he died, and he is honoured, and the broken shards of Gurthang are set beside him, never to be touched again. And when all is completed, and Túrin Turambar is laid to rest, the elves and men make for him a lament, a song of beauty and sorrow, to remember forever the valour of Turambar and the loveliness of Niniel. A great grey stone is placed on top of the burial mound, and onto the stone is carved the words in the writing of Doriath, Túrin Turambar Dagnir Glaurunga. Túrin Turambar, Glaurung's bane. And below that, on the grey stone, are also carved the words Nienor Niniel, so that she might also be remembered, even though her body is not here, and none now know where the cold waters of Tyaglin have taken her. And here ends the tale of the children of Húrin, longest of all the lays of Beleriand. And what an ending. Except there are still one or two loose ends. Like, whatever happened to Mime, the petty dwarf? What becomes of Brethiel now that Turambar and Niniel and Brandir and Hunthor and Dorlas are all dead? What about Húrin himself? Well, the answer to all those questions will be found in the next First Age story, kind of a much shorter sequel to this one, that'll explore the wanderings of Húrin and his eventual fate. And after that relatively short story, there are only 3 big tales of the First Age left. Firstly, that short epilogue about the fate of Húrin is gonna set up, and then kind of grow into, a sequel to a different story. A sequel to the Tale of Beren and Luthien. Don't forget, those two are still very much alive, enjoying their second life together far away in the summery south, and at this point in the story, they have a son. And High King Eleuthingol of Doriath has a Silmaril. And the sons of Feanor have an oath to fulfill. So, the next epic tale will be an account of the son of Beren and Luthien, the fate of the Silmaril of Doriath, and all the drama that unfolds because of it. I am super excited to talk about all of that in good time, but there is one moment wrapped up among those future events that I'm going to talk about right now. A, because it involves Húrin, and B, because it is, I think, a necessary conclusion to the tale of his children. And Christopher Tolkien agreed. So, I will go into the details in the next First Age Untangled series, but what we need to know for this video is that after all of his children are dead, Húrin, still chained to his chair atop Thangorodrim, is visited by Morgoth one last time. And after gloating and being generally awful, Morgoth does the cruelest and most destructive thing he can conceive of. He lets Húrin go. There is no mercy here, only a furtherance of Morgoth's evil purpose. For Húrin is now a changed man, a broken man, reduced to unimaginable bitterness and grief. Remember, he's been forced to watch and to feel and to know all the misery that's defined the lives of his children. And now that they are gone, he has to live with it. He wanders far in his sorrow and suffers much. But about 2 years after the deaths of Túrin and Nienor, he at last comes to the lands of Brethiel, and eventually he arrives at Cabed Nairmarth. He approaches the burial mound of his children, but he doesn't need to read the stone inscription. However, as Húrin turns away, he sees that he is not alone. In the shadow of the stones there sits a figure. Some homeless wanderer, broken by age, it seems, but the rags that this figure is wrapped in are the remnant of a woman's garb. The beggar lifts her face. Haggard and hungry as a long-hunted wolf's, she is grey, with a sharp nose and broken teeth. But in her eyes there is a light, an elven light. that Húrin has seen before. And although her eyes are now wild and full of fear, Húrin recognizes the light that once made her the proudest mortal woman of the days of old. Morwen Elethwen, the mother of the children of Húrin. When Húrin cries his wife's name, she rises and stumbles forward, and he catches her as she falls. They've not seen each other in 28 years. "You come at last," Morwen says. "I have waited too long." Húrin takes his wife in his arms. "It was a dark road. I have come as I could. But they are lost," Morwen cries. "I know, but you are not." Morwen clutches at Húrin's cloak, and she says to him, "Almost. I shall go with the sun. Little time is left, but if you know, tell me, how did she find him?" Húrin sits beside the stone, and he holds his wife, and they do not speak again. Together, they watch the sun go down, and when the last of its light fades into the west, Morwen sighs, and she clasps Húrin's hand, and she is still. As a cold night sets in, and the stars emerge above him, Húrin knows that his wife has died. And that is the true ending of the Children of Húrin. The whole family is gone, except for Húrin. He still has a horrible life left to live. It's a desperately tragic ending, but it's the only ending that's appropriate for this desperately tragic story. In the tale of the Children of Húrin, Morgoth wins. It sucks, but he does. However, in the much wider story of the Elder Days, a story in which this story is only a chapter, Morgoth does not win. He does terrible things, and you may struggle to believe this, but things are actually destined to get worse before the end. But in the end, Morgoth is going to lose. He is going to face a reckoning and retribution for what he's done. And when that reckoning comes, he will suffer total defeat. And that's not really a spoiler. It's kinda the point of Tolkien's entire mythology. Evil might conquer. It might destroy the lives that it touches. It might make all things seem hopeless. But it cannot endure. It cannot overcome Ilúvatar. And, as I mentioned in the introduction video of this series, in Middle-earth there is a prophecy which by the time of The Lord of the Rings is still very much unfulfilled. And as with all things like this, it's pretty tricky to talk about whether or not it's canon, but this prophecy written by Tolkien states that at the end of all things, there will come a battle. The battle. The Dagor Dagorath. The battle of battles. And when it comes to how this last battle is gonna end, and who it is that gets to deliver the killing blow, the final blow in all wars between good and evil, the character that Tolkien chose for this task was Túrin, son of Húrin. In the sketch of the mythology, which Tolkien constructed as a means of providing backstory for this tale, he wrote, "It shall be Túrin, who with his black sword will slay Morgoth, and thus the children of Húrin shall be avenged." And in later writings, Tolkien told us, "The black sword of Túrin shall deliver unto Morgoth his death and final end. And so shall the children of Húrin and all men be avenged." Morgoth did win the children of Húrin, but in the end, Túrin is gonna win the last battle. And he will be reborn and live again in Arda as it should have been. And Morgoth is going to die forever. And so, my dear friends, that is the end of this series. I really hope you enjoyed it. I really hope that you can see the beauty in it, and I hope that you come back to it every now and again in your mind. This is a story unlike anything else Tolkien ever wrote. So, if you did enjoy this series, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and be sure to click like and leave a comment on this video if you want to. There will be more Tolkien Untangled coming in the future, but for now, as always, my dear friends, much love, stay groovy, and Nevair Melanin.